And joining us this week on the podcast, Andrew, you brought a friend. You phoned a friend in, millionaire style. Introduce your guest pundit.
Yeah, I don't know if he's gonna help my side of the discussion here, but
hopefully not.
Phone a friend, one of my best buds here, Drew. Drew is not only a friend, he's a former teammate as well, and we've had a lot of fun conversations regarding all kinds of things, from refereeing to some more general topics around soccer. So, Drew, it's awesome to have you here. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. We've gone back and forth a few times offline, so it'll be fun to go another round online.
All right, Elliot, what we got up here first?
So a few weeks ago, we covered an incident on the podcast involving Newcastle at home to Manchester City, and there was an offside, but it was a delayed flag, and it resulted in a Newcastle goal being scored and disallowed, and the Manchester City goalkeeper injured, and it sparked a debate, in particular between Andrew and Drew, as to whether the delaying of the assistant referee's flag was justified or not. I guess we left some threads dangling in that original podcast because the debate is still alive, which is why we've got Drew on to talk about it. So the issues that we covered was in the days post VAR, the mechanic of the assistant referee is when there's an offside situation. If there's an attacking situation and it's a marginal offside decision and there's some element of doubt in their mind as to whether it's on or off, the mechanic is to keep the flag down, let the attacking phase play out, and then if that results in a goal or a penalty, VAR can intervene and bring it back for offside. It doesn't work in the reverse. If the flag goes up straight away and play is stopped for offside, VAR can't intervene and say, oh no, it was onside, let's see what would have happened. Doesn't work. And so we've got this situation where we have the delayed flag, and we were looking at the pros and cons of that. The pros, most obvious one being accuracy of decisions. The most obvious cons are, well, it delays the game, it's frustrating for fans, and the risk of player injury is greater when you have this allowing play to go on when it should stop. So hopefully I've brought us up to speed. Drew, you and Andrew spoke about it at the time, and hopefully you've seen our previous episode. What haven't we covered, or what do you want to emphasize that maybe we didn't emphasize before?
So I want to start off by saying that I probably come at it from a little bit different viewpoint than you three. I don't work in soccer. I played with Andrew. I have never officiated. This is coming from a background of a fan and somebody who might not have the background knowledge that all of you guys likely do. So Andrew and I had a conversation, and I started by saying, sooner or later, someone's going to get hurt. We have, luckily from watching on TV, a lot of the times we have viewpoints right down the line, and some of these don't seem, like you just stated, marginal. Some of these are the best officials in the world. They have been calling this rule for what the Premier League started in 1890. They've been calling it for, at this point, over 120 years. Some of the calls that I feel we are risking the players to an injury don't need to be there, because I think we've almost overcorrected. I will say that it's very easy to look at me and say, I want my cake and I want to be able to eat it too. And I understand that. And I've actually softened a little bit from my last conversation with Andrew. However, I still think it's very clear that some of these I feel could be called, and they're not being called until a massive amount of effort is given. People are in on goal. This is more of a frenzy type of situation, and contact and collisions are bound to happen, because a lot of these are, they're likely in on goal because they were offside. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think we are not giving them enough credit when at one point the the viewpoint was we need to take away the ability for human error, I guess.
So, Elliot, it sounds like, and I think this is what Drew's hitting on, and I think I've kind of felt this way too, that this opens up for the ARs to become overly reliant on leaving it to VAR, and therefore you get less than marginal calls or calls that were a little more clear just being left to VAR. And then obviously, as we see in some of these instances, an injury or something bad can occur because of that. And it really shouldn't happen because the AR should be at the level to not have to rely on VAR as much. And maybe it's just like a complacency thing.
As I'm looking at this paused photo right now, 4 years ago, I believe without a shadow of a doubt, the man looking directly down the line, I understand, I believe it's what I would assume it's, I don't know who's playing left back right now. There is a little bit of a line of sight issue. However, there are 3 players not even remotely close. I think the flag goes up. I think this is stopped. I think no one ever speaks about it again.
I think you're right, Drew. And the reason I think you're right is because in this very case, the assistant referee sees what we're seeing now, this line. I believe at that point in his head, he's decided it is offside. The attacking phase plays out. And then without the prompt of the referee, he then goes back to where the offside offence was committed and raises the flag. So the assistant referee does recognise an offside, a player is offside, and an offside offence has been committed. And yes, pre-VAR, I think his flag does go up at that point, and likely Edison doesn't end up getting injured. And so really you've hit upon the issue. It's correct. I guess the underlying point I would make here is that there are no solutions where everyone gets their cake and eat it. It's just a series of trade-offs. And what trade-off are you willing to make in exchange for what payoff?
So Elliot, now that you say that, I was going to inquire about that. At the beginning, you spoke about having doubt. And I think all of us can agree that if you have doubt, leave it down. That's not a problem. Do you believe, based on what you just said, that what is the burden of doubt that they have to have? Because in this situation, do you think he looked across the line and says, I don't know, I'm gonna keep it down? Or do you think it was a deliberate response of, hey, this is close enough, keep it down, VAR has my back?
If anyone that's been an assistant referee before, and in this particular case, Andrew and I have both done it, it's very much in the moment, you find yourself, seeing the play in front of you, and it's quite hard to describe the level of certainty. Like it's quite hard to articulate it, but at some point you find your arm goes up or it doesn't. But really, if there is doubt, we're talking about offside position here. That's an objective right or wrong, on or off. And so there is a right or a wrong answer. You can have subjective doubt, but objectively a player is in an offside position or an onside position. What becomes subjective down the line is when they become actively involved in active play. But we're talking about humans making decisions. We're not talking about cosmic justice. We're talking about humans making decisions. And in the moment, if there's enough doubt in your head, you keep the flag down.
If I can defend the protocol here a little bit. So if I'll throw an image on here so the viewers can see this. But right now I'll just use my mouse. In this moment, and we've talked about this in the last episode, and Drew, I know we've talked about it, but there's probably a lot of doubt in this AR's mind because he has to be looking, this is probably almost a 90-degree angle, right? He's got to be looking at the ball and trying to decide when it was struck while also then looking down the line. And when he's looking down the line, this has to be a very confusing sight. He is seeing a lot of people down this one line and determining which Newcastle player is where on this line opposed to the Man City players. Especially because Isak here, he's the only one that remotely timed it well. The other 2 Newcastle players they were offside the entire time. But he did time it fairly well where he did come back here And for a little bit there, he was in line. So this has to be, and this all happened in a split second. So to be able to see both the ball and the line and have confidence that he was offside, I just think that would be incredibly difficult. And this is where some of that nuance I was talking about is how do you, as an AR, you have to keep your eye on so many things all at once. To know for certain that someone is offside is extremely difficult. And I think in this case, he really made the right decision. Now, 4 years ago, as you mentioned, Drew, would he have called it? Probably, especially with all the Newcastle players being eyes probably listening to the Newcastle players, and he probably would have put the flag up. But I could easily see that being a couple feet back here, being technically onside, and that being called the wrong way 4 years ago.
So Elliot, are you basically saying that it's almost a necessary evil to make sure instead of disallowing opportunities to score that were legal, it's a necessary evil to allow for an anomalous situation as of this type of injury to promote?
I would say I know what you mean. I would say acceptable risk.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't. This is such a difficult, nuanced decision, and having not been an official, during my my morning shower thoughts this morning, I was thinking honestly, what do I want? What would make this better? And this may be coming out of left field for me. I'm wondering, is there communication going on between the officials at this time? Because I know they're in each other's ears. Would there be, if they opened up officials' live mics, not during the match, but being directly afterwards, like, all right, let's hear what the officials were saying at this point. Would you hear the linesman go, "Not sure, boys, keeping it down," or is it too quick?
No, that all happens on the fly. They're mic'd up. It's recorded, so for their own training, they get to, Howard Webb after every game, let's say, will be watching the video with all the audio, so the play-by-play communication between assistant referee and referee at this point will be the ball's played through, and the assistant referee will be communicating offside, and the referee will say, "Okay, wait, play," and then so they already know that the assistant referee thinks there's been an offside. So yeah, they do know, and it's transparent between them.
Do you think it would ease the public's concern or maybe just anger if they made those public?
I would love to see it. Like I think a lot of fans would.
Absolutely.
And I think we do get some access to it. I think the first high profile clip that I saw where we had access to the communication between the assistants and the referees was the 2018 FA Cup final between Manchester United and Chelsea. The game was 1-0. Chelsea won it with a penalty, and it was a DOGSO red card. Jeremy, you're nodding. I'm sure you remember this. So some weeks or months after the event, they released a video clip with the interaction between the referee and the players, the communication between the officiating crew before the foul, but as the players developing, they recognize already that it's an obvious goal scoring opportunity, so that if there's a foul, they already are one step ahead of themselves and they know what to do if there is a foul. So yeah, it's fascinating to watch. I think there'd be an appetite for fans to have access to that sort of audio.
All right, let's jump over to a few other topics we want to hit while we have you. Two penalty calls, well, a call and a non-call to kind of go over. One involving a Harvey Elliott penalty, and the other Saka not getting the call. There it is. And Wan-Bissaka kind of cutting across there with the tackle.
I mean, from the broadcast here, it definitely looks like Wan-Bissaka catches him. I mean, that's kind of the first observation. Now that we don't have a great angle, but Just gonna play this back again to watch the kind of the live broadcast.
Here we go.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'll have the one angle. All right. Well, I mean, so Elliot, what was your first thought when you watched this? Did it look like a penalty?
When I was watching this live from the TV broadcast angle, I saw it. It looked like a penalty. The first thing I do when I'm watching these things is, where's the ref and how decisive is he being? Looks like the referee is right there, and he is very quick with his whistle and his hand pointing to the penalty. So the referee seemed very clear. And then on the replay is where it starts to get quite interesting, because you see Wan-Bissaka coming in, and we're expecting to see contact with Harvey Elliott's leading foot. He knocks the ball forward, I think, with his left. So we're expecting to see contact with his left foot, and that's the foul that we're expecting. And what we see on the replay is that there's no contact with that foot. It's Harvey Elliott's trail foot that is impacted. And so that caused some people to say that it was not a foul, that Harvey Elliott dragged his foot, Harry Kane style, Jamie Vardy style, dragged his foot. Comment on is I hear a lot of people saying, well, if you're going to give A, then you've got to give B, without really going into the specifics of the similarities and differences between A and B. And our job as referees is to look at these incidents in the highest level of detail possible, so that we can spot the differences between A and B. And I was chipping in on social media, especially on the Saka Neuer incident, where people were doing that very low resolution. Well, if Harvey Elliott is a penalty, then Saka has to be a penalty, without really going into it. This angle is the one that shows the trailing leg of Harvey Elliott is where the contact actually is. Now, here's what I think the similarities and differences are between the Saka and the Harvey Elliott one. With Wan-Bissaka on Harvey Elliott, look at Wan-Bissaka's movement. He makes a slide, he makes a lunge, he doesn't play the ball at all. And then there is
the trailing leg with his leg.
Yeah, and there is a little element of Harvey Elliott, who could have arguably taken evasive action and doesn't, lets his leg just drag to ensure the contact. So there is an element of that. But really, because of the way Wan-Bissaka goes in, I don't think there's enough room for doubt in the referee's mind not to give it.
If I may, Elliot, I do have a question. Andrew, if you could go back to the initial one. So I've had a lot of Manchester United supporters speaking to me, saying the exact same thing. How is this a penalty if Saka's is not? The thing I was looking at regarding the trail leg, yes, 100% there was a little bit of a drag. He did not take evasive action. However, my thing was, if he continues to sprint, if he continues his normal gait, I believe I guess it would have been his right. I believe it's his right. Yeah, it would have been hit right here. I think his right foot ends up stepping on the quad of Wan-Bissaka, which would have been a foul as well.
Correct. And I think, so what the referee has to do is look at this and say, there was contact. Was Wan-Bissaka careless in causing that contact? And I think it's a lot easier in this case for the referee to say, yes, Wan-Bissaka was careless, even if there's an element of Harvey Elliott maybe dragging his foot. I think it's quite hard to argue against the fact that Wan-Bissaka was careless. And that's one of the big differences between this and the Neuer incident. So with Neuer he does stick his leg out at something of an angle, which it's enough to say, yeah, there's a little bit of an ingredient of the foul there. Look, Neuer's right leg does come out at a bit of an angle.
It steps into the path, kind of.
Somewhat. Now, Saka's last touch of the ball with his right foot was probably about 2 meters away from where Neuer was. And after Saka's last touch of the ball, that same foot plants on the ground, and then Saka propels himself forward such that he can't stop, slow down, change direction. And I'd say it was that caused the referee to have enough doubt that Neuer was careless in his action. That doesn't mean I'm here saying it's impossible to argue that that was a penalty, because I think there's a little something of Neuer's, the angle of his leg, to say he took a little bit of a risk. But was he careless? And I think there's enough doubt in the referee's mind to say Neuer wasn't careless in causing that contact, therefore no foul. Now,
I was going to say, so as looking at it as not an official, from what I looked at it somewhat similarly to the Harvey Elliott situation with kind of what I just stated. The normal gate meant something to me, at least as looking at it as a fan. I thought the normal gate wasn't changed enough by Harvey to refer to it as a quote unquote dive or looking for a contact in an inappropriate manner.
yeah.
I believe reasonable people can differ on both of these. They are close enough. For me, when I saw Saka's right leg, for me, his normal gait would have took him away from it, and I saw it kind of pop out. And that looked like he was looking for a contact almost in an inappropriate manner. Not enough for a dive or anything like that, but I'm a basketball coach. I've officiated basketball. We talk about cylinders a lot. Cylinders straight up and down. So if I'm a defender, I can put my hands up, and if you bang into me, hey, I'm straight up and down. I'm set. We're fine.
Right.
I think Saka almost left his cylinder to make contact with Neuer. You are correct. I actually never noticed the fact that Neuer's leg was out at a little bit of an obscure angle. However, I think Jeremy was extremely astute in stating that he was almost stepping into the path of the ball. But still, for me, when you almost chicken wing your leg out, for better terms, I think you are drawing that more than a careless challenge from Manuel Neuer at that point.
And Drew, I really agree with what you're saying, in particular that reasonable people can disagree on both of these incidents. And moving on to VAR, VAR is not there to re-referee the game. Again, to use a legal analogy, when a case goes to an appeal judge, the appeal judge doesn't look down at that previous decision and say, well, I would have reached a different decision, therefore. What the appellate judge will look at is, what are the range of reasonable responses? Was that original decision within the range of reasonable responses? And if so, appeal rejected. If not, appeal approved. So with VAR, those video assistant referees in the studio are not looking at the Elliott incident or the Saka incident and asking themselves, well, if I was the ref, I would have given a penalty or not given a penalty. They're looking at, was this decision within the range of reasonable responses? And so for both of those, I think VAR is not going to overturn either. Now, if Harvey Elliott doesn't get his penalty, I'm not convinced VAR steps in and awards it. If Saka gets his penalty, I'm not sure VAR goes in and overturns it. I think though in both of those instances, I think the on-field decision can stand. The frustration there is, God, we just want consistency and we want certainty and we want to know what's a foul and what's not. It's really hard. There's just so much grey area and there's so much subjectivity about all these nuanced things that we've been talking about. It's possible to have reasonable disagreement.
All right, let's jump to one last piece of controversy. This one literally just happened. Second leg, Champions League, Barcelona, PSG. Araujo's red card. Araujo's rojo here.
So Barcola he's in. Referee makes the decision and pulls out the red card very quickly. I think we
Yeah,
should
he was
add.
quick
I
to
mean,
it.
there was no
Yep.
hesitation here.
Barca fans will
Which
be
I
quick
think
to
is-
tell you that he was quick to it.
So Elliot, I don't think there's really necessarily any controversy here as far as our differing opinions, and we'll bring Drew into this as well because I'd be curious to hear his perspective as someone that's has not officiated soccer. But Elliot, can you explain why the referee may have handed him a red card?
So we're talking about DOGSO. For those that don't know, that's denying an obvious goal scoring opportunity. And there's quite a lot for the referee to figure out. And, you know, we're used to doing it in a split second. But here's what goes through the referee's mind. As the player is through on goal, and I'm sure to touch back on what we were talking about before, the assistant referee and the referee in this point are saying DOGSO, DOGSO, DOGSO situation. So the referee is on high alert in case there's a foul, because he knows that there would be big repercussions. So a DOGSO, we're looking at 4 elements to a DOGSO. Firstly, the distance between the offence and the goal. In this case, the offence takes place just outside the penalty area. So we've got distance, it's close. So tick, distance. Then the general direction of play is the second element. The Paris Saint-Germain striker is bearing down on goal, slightly diagonal angle, but he's going directly towards goal. So we've got the second element, tick. Thirdly, it's the likelihood of maintaining control, but for the foul, is he still, in possession or in control of the ball? And I'm confident we have a tick here, but I'll get back to that one. And then the fourth element is the location and number of defenders. And in this case, Araujo is behind Dembele, and it's just the goalkeeper in front. So we have a tick for that one as well. So we have, when you're able to do 4 ticks out of 4, you have a goal scoring situation, and therefore the foul is a denial of that obvious goal scoring situation. Now, what's the restart and what do we do next? In this case, it looks like the referee, he's given a free kick. Where you have a DOGSO that results in a free kick, the result is a red card, always. If the referee had awarded a penalty, then you can downgrade that from red to yellow if it's a penalty and if it's a genuine attempt to play the ball. If it's not a genuine attempt to play the ball and it's a penalty, it's still a red card. So those are the real elements here. The only way I would say Barcelona could possibly argue that there's no red card warranted here. One is if you think it's not a foul. Well, I don't think there's really a case to say it's not a foul. Can they argue that it's not DOGSO? I think the only element of DOGSO that they can possibly play with is the likelihood of maintaining control of the ball. So that last touch of the ball by Dembele before the foul, if they can argue that it was a heavy touch and the goalie might have gotten there first, then you can say it wasn't an obvious goal scoring situation. I don't love that argument. It's not impossible, but that's the best they've got. So if they would successfully downgrade that from a DOGSO to a SPA, then you have a foul outside the box, a free kick, and a yellow card for SPA.
And you don't love that because it's not clear and obvious that the goalkeeper would have gotten there first, right? If it was clear and obvious, like, say he accidentally had a wild touch and it was nowhere near the player and in the goalkeeper's hands, then so it's just because it wasn't clear and obvious, right? Just
wild touch, or if his last touch takes him wide and away from goal rather than bearing down, then you have an argument of downgrading it not as a DOGSO situation but a promising attack. You need all 4 elements in order for it to be DOGSO. So yeah, I think the referee has to be. I think the referee was satisfied that, but for the foul, Dembele is still in control or has an opportunity to maintain control of the ball and have a scoring opportunity. And then I guess the last thing, which is interesting, is what category of foul is this? Now, this would matter more if it was inside the box and a penalty. It looks like at the same time you have a hold, where Araujo pulls back Dembele's shoulder, and at the same time a lower body trip. Now, they're both fouls, but where that can have an impact is if this was in the box, a hold can never be a genuine attempt to play the ball. So if the referee thinks it's DOGSO, a penalty, and a hold, it's still a red card. If the referee thinks it's DOGSO, a penalty, and a trip, and the trip was a genuine attempt to play the ball, then the referee can downgrade from red to yellow. There's a lot to DOGSO. The referee's got to make these instant decisions, but there's a lot of layers and ifs and buts. And it's one of the toughest calls that a referee can make in a game, because on the one hand, their field of vision for the DOGSO needs to be quite wide. You need to have this wide field of vision to see where are the defenders, what's the play, is it an obvious goal scoring opportunity? And then at the same time, narrow and sharpen your field of vision to that point of contact. And that's a very difficult skill to do. And it's, you know, it's about anticipation and awareness. So I think the referee does great here. It's an excellent decision.
Now, Drew, now I don't know if you got to watch this live or not, but you know, as someone that isn't trained to go through all those things that Elliot just articulated, were you surprised to see a red card on display?
So first and foremost, there was no elemental analyzation such as Mr. Katz went through, which was fantastic. Second of all, you are correct. As a fan, we do not think that way, because when I heard DOGSO, first thought was, no, that's neither of those players are named DOGSO. Second thought was, I really doubt the referee is named DOGSO. And then third, I was like, oh, okay, here we go. That makes more sense. So what and I may have hit a couple of the elements without knowing it, but the first thing I thought of was, I looked and I saw basically when the I guess I'll just use the term offense, or the attacking player, when his right shoulder basically got in front of the defender, I'm like, okay, he's in, and there's no one else next to him. I wanted to see if they were shoulder to shoulder, and he brings it to the ground. I don't think it's goal scoring. It's a goal scoring opportunity because he wasn't the last man back. As soon as I saw him get goal side completely, almost both shoulders goal side of the defender, and I didn't notice a wild touch that brought the ball away, I thought it was extremely easy of a call. Of course, I wasn't going through all the requisite and necessary elements of it, but on this one, I'm not sure, unless you want to debate the touch, I'm not sure reasonable people can reach a disagreement on this. Simply because, at least reasonable, somewhat informed, because I realize that I am not informed whatsoever, but I at least know the rules enough to be like, that seems like something there shouldn't be a lot of complaining about.
Yeah, you know, when I first watched it, I wasn't fully paying attention. I thought that was kind of a heavy touch, but watching it back, I actually think he definitely gets there for the goalkeeper. So I don't think that's even relevant. I think it was actually a pretty good touch. I think looking back, I feel, and I was mentioning this to Jeremy and Elliot, I have a little bit of a soft spot for Barca. I feel it was, I don't think it was intentional. I think he did trip and kind of fall onto the Paris Saint-Germain player, which is unfortunate. But, you know, going back to our last episode, the referee, and I think this is important to keep reemphasizing, the referee cannot officiate trying to read the player's mind. He can't sit there and go, well, did he mean to do it or did he not mean to do it? It's not important. He lost control.
How do you feel about the upper body contact?
Okay, this is a good question. So I don't think, if he doesn't trip, I think he tripped on accident. And if he doesn't trip on accident, or maybe he tripped on purpose, but I don't think there was enough contact on the upper body. I think if he stays upright, I don't think there's any foul at all. He made a little bit of contact, but not enough. I don't think it would ever have gotten called. When he trips and knocks him down, that's when you just really can't argue it. But I feel that there's very little contact on the upper body.
So Andrew, it sounds like what you're saying
probably
is it's supposing that this had everything is the same, but it resulted in a penalty versus a free kick. You'd be leaning towards a yellow card for the player for the tripping foul that was a genuine attempt to play the ball. It sounds like that's your position.
No, my position is there'd be no foul. If there was no lower body contact.
Understood.
Because he doesn't.
Sorry.
Because he
What I'm
doesn't.
saying
He doesn't trip theoretically.
But you believe though that it is a trip rather than a pull, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I understand you correctly. If it had resulted in a penalty for the trip rather than a free kick, as the referee, you'd be seeing a DOGSO situation that's a penalty, a tripping foul that was a genuine attempt to play the ball, and therefore a yellow card would be your outcome.
Correct. Yeah, I would not implement triple punishment because I do feel it was a genuine attempt, and I would disregard the contact to the upper body. I felt it was quite negligible.
Understood.
What did you guys think? Did you guys think there was enough contact in the upper body to warrant a foul in itself?
My initial response was that's a foul in American football with the horse collar and a foul in European football with not playing the ball. If it was only up top, and I think you hit the nail on the head, which makes refereeing and I think the sport in general difficult, is when you said if he goes down. If he fights through the upper body contact, is there a foul? Potentially not. If he goes down and makes the official make a decision being in a DOGSO situation, I think it's called.
Okay. Elliot, Jeremy, what do you guys think?
I just laughed. That was my reaction when I saw it. No, I definitely thought it was. I thought there was plenty of contact with the grabbing, and then I think there is a little bit there with the legs. I think there is a little bit of coming together with the legs. I think it was enough. I was actually a little thrown off. Initially, I thought the other defender was close enough to where it wouldn't have been considered, last man back kind of thing.
So you don't have a DOGSO. You have maybe a spar situation.
I think I probably still would go with the DOGSO, but that was the part I had in question of, well, there was another center back and he was in the box, but was he close enough?
So the
he
referee
actually intervened.
The referee doesn't have to have a crystal ball that says, but for the foul, this would have been a goal, or but for the foul. It's a goal scoring opportunity. Doesn't mean it would have been a goal. And so that defender that you're referring to, Jeremy, I think is remote enough that he wouldn't have impacted Dembele's opportunity to score but for the foul. So at least that would be the referee's thinking. But you're certainly right to be paying attention to who the defender is, how far are they. When you look into it in a certain level, it matters who the defender is. How fast is it? Are they a fast defender? Are they slow? Are they capable of catching up with the player? So all of these little details go into the referee's little matrix of details. I think there's enough to warrant a holding foul here. If you offer Dembele £1 million to stay on his feet, I'd back him to stay on his feet. But there's possibly enough to call it a holding offence or a tripping offence. To be honest, Araujo takes a risk. When you put your arm there on someone's shoulder, you're taking a risk, and if it results in a player going down a little bit soft, despite the contact, you take a risk that the referee's going to see it the way you don't want to see it.
Elliot, if I may, kind of pulling this back into something we spoke about earlier with having a little bit more transparency with the officiating. Do you think that the disincentive to the larger leagues of miking up all of the officials and letting it be transparent to the public is because the level of discourse on the field, which the officials themselves are like, that's just the game, they're playing, they're heated, that's part of our sport. do you think that would be shown at a broader level and they cannot allow that to become public?
Yeah, I wonder how much of that broadcast would be that would be broadcastable in primetime television. There's language that is you just can't broadcast. Referees, whether they're handling dissent or abuse, that they it's easy to let your personal feelings influence your decision, but really you need to be able to look at the conduct in an objective a way as possible. Now, there might be some referees who are very thick-skinned and they can handle a certain level of dissent or abuse and not issue a yellow or a red card because it doesn't affect them personally, but it can affect the game. When dissent is let out of control or abuse is let out of control, even if subjectively the referee doesn't care, it affects the game and they have to deal with it with the yellow card for dissent and the red card for abuse. Similarly, if you're overly sensitive, you need to be able to discern between low-level disagreement and dissent and abuse. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I'm just enjoying learning. So, Elliot, I know you mentioned a few legal standards earlier. If an official makes a call that truly falls below the standard of a reasonable official at that point, let's say they make a decision that's not up to the standard of their profession, their level. Do you believe there should be anything other than just demotion at play? If other officials are looking at you and saying there was no reason you should have done that, you should.
Do you have a specific example in mind?
I do, but not for football. Another conversation Andrew and I have had of a blatant missed call that a world-class official should not be missing.
Just describe it and see if that triggers anything for me.
Layup, hits the forearm, ball goes off the glass, game-winning shot missed, game over. Lost by 1.
So foul not called.
Yes.
All right. So,
and for more context, some of the conversation was how do you punish a referee in that case? Do you demote them? Is there financial implications? How do you make sure that referees are incentivized to perform at their best, and when they don't, when they completely alter, I shouldn't say that, at least in the eyes of the fans, when they completely alter the result of a game, how do you handle that? So
we're talking about at the professional level where we have professional referees, right? Not your referee doing your under 12s, on
not
Randall's
Gotham.
Island.
This is professional top level.
So I guess the refereeing errors can come in the category of factual errors and errors of law. And the error that you just described with the layup seems to be a factual error. In other words, for whatever reason, the referee just didn't see what he needed to see. It's not that he thought if you grab someone by the arm while they're doing a layup, that is not an offense. So that would be an error of law, but he's made an error of fact, correct? So if a referee is making errors of fact, that could be for a number of reasons. And we're not talking about these, within reasonable decisions, right? We're talking about if you have any sort of view, you're wrong. Like something that's an obvious handball or an obvious trip or an obvious offside or an obvious ball crossing the line for a goal, something like that. So if it's a factual error, then it could be down to positioning, movement, someone just getting in the referee's way, which is to diagnose that. That would be the referees got the wrong angle. They, so the coaching that would be required of that referee would be in their performance. If a referee makes an error of law, we had one quite recently between Forest and Liverpool in the Premier League, where the referee stopped play. It wasn't a foul. I think he was dealing with a player injury. Now, the law says that wherever the restart is a drop ball, which takes place from where the ball was when the whistle was blown. And what the referee did was he did start the game with a drop ball, but he made an error of law. I guess it was an error of law. He gave the drop ball to the wrong team in the wrong place. I think there was a misdiagnosis of, where the ball was when he stopped it, or because there was a long time between the whistle and the restart, maybe they forgot. So this referee was heavily criticized. He was taken off his assignment, I believe, for the following week. He was criticized by former referees, saying this was an egregious error of law. So it was very much in the public spotlight. It had an impact in the game in the sense that it was within the same phase of play, albeit a couple of minutes later, Liverpool, the team that benefited from the error, scored a goal. So there was causation there attached to the mistake. But yeah, I'm not sure I have the answer as to what should happen to these guys. Should they be demoted? By losing an assignment, you're hurting their income. They're not making money when they're not assigned. So it's not a fine, but it's an opportunity cost, I suppose. But yeah, they're elite athletes, these referees, performing at the highest level. And they've gone through years and years and years of training, assessment, promotion, observation, and the expectations on them are high and the stakes are high. So they can't, although I want to sympathize with the referees, if we're too lenient, then the standards drop and mistakes become acceptable. And we don't want to condone mistakes. We want to help referees improve and develop. But yeah, you need accountability.
I think where a lot of our conversation was about was really kind of coming down to whether we think fining a referee is acceptable, for which I argued very strongly that I think that would be a very unacceptable solution. With the caveat of if you had proof it was intentional,
like corruption.
That's obviously a completely different conversation. I feel strongly that for refereeing, even at the top level, although they're paid well, arguably still not paid well enough, they build their lives around the matches or the games that they're scheduled for. And I think it's incredibly unfair and a really bad precedent to start fining them and taking away the money that they should have earned. Now, opportunity cost is still essentially a loss in finance, but that's something that, I think that they can plan around and wrap their head around. Whereas, refereeing an entire game, missing one call at the end, and then losing your bag for that game feels incredibly unfair. Unless there's some sort of proof that they did it on purpose. Players don't get fined for missing layups; they get fined for showing up late or other things, but they don't get fined for their performance. I think that's a whole different conversation.
May I briefly elaborate? Briefly?
Sure. Yeah.
So how I view it personally is, every single human being with a profession plans their life around their job. Every single person, especially in my field, my wife's field, I'm an attorney, my wife's in the medical field. We have legal malpractice, medical malpractice. The way we look at it, the way that it's analyzed is, would a reasonable person in that situation have made that decision? I'm not talking about, missing a obvious goal scoring opportunity. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm talking about potentially the goal in the World Cup of England, Germany. The ball went over the line. They didn't see it, guys. Sorry, we move on. We're talking about the blown layup the misapplication of law. The way it works in our field is that a board or a judge would review and give that reasonable individual within the same circumstance standard of proof. And if it was proven that they did not reach that level, a fine would take place. My wife would be fined as a medical provider. I would be fined as an attorney. I don't necessarily think it has to be done by the peers, though. If you, Elliot, as an official says that is unacceptable, that is not to our level, that is malpractice, I have no problem instituting a financial punishment, but it has to be a very, very high level, not just a blown call every once in a while. That is just what that's where I'm coming from.
And I think I would agree that if you are going to consider fines, then the bar has to be very high, because you want to strike some sort of balance between disincentivizing whatever it is, corruption, negligence, but also you don't want the unintended consequence of putting off referees aspiring to become referees and rise. So if it's if the bar is too low, before too long you're not going to have refs, or the ones that you do have are not of the same skill level. So that would be the balance to try and arrive at. Where that is, I don't know, but yes, the standard would have to be high, and the fine would have to be not so great that someone that would otherwise be an aspiring ref says, no, sorry, not worth the risk.
Yeah, agreed.
Well done. Well said.
All right, Jeremy, you want to take us home?
Yeah. That'll wrap it up. If you see something while you're watching a game that doesn't look right, a dodgy play in your own match, send it to us. We will chop it up. We will litigate it. We will look at it right here on the Whistle Stop.